What's going on, everybody? It's been a little while since your favorite hillbillies got on here. Of course, today I decided to come up here and shoot a video. Now we're in the middle of a windstorm, it seems like. So if this gets too bad, y'all can't understand it or can't hear it, I'll just delete it and redo it again. I got a few videos I'm gonna like to get to you. I've got the story I want to tell, and then I've got another. Oh, it ain't really a story. I just want to talk to you about what I think's causing a lot of these cryptids that people seeing in the Great Smoky Mountains. Talking about stuff like the pale crawler. Some people call it a rake. The augmen. What's brought those out recently. And then I'd like to talk to you again a little bit more from Dennis Martin and what's going on with him. Of course, there's no new developments in the case. It's only seems like YouTube has blowed up with opinions here of lately, and I think a lot of them might be my fault or caused by me, some of the videos I've made. So we'll talk about that, where I still stand on that. I'll probably put that off doing that video later. I have an interview tomorrow for a movie that's being made with a man. He asked me if I would participate in his movie, and I told him I would, as long as he would not show my identity. Of course, my identity is getting out there now a little bit. A few people know who I am or what it look like. A few trips to the LBL's let it out. I've told a few people myself. It's more the people that live around here near me that can really reach out and do harm to me or my family. Those are the ones I really want to keep at bay. But anyway, let's talk about the story today. This story comes from a neighbor in town, and I remember my granny telling it when I was a kid. We would drive by this woman's property. Seemed like every couple of years or so, and I can remember her or my aunt and people pointing out, that this lady lived over there. This was her property, and this old shack standing in the woods was her shack. What was left of it then was falling down. I was probably 6 years old then. I'm sure it's long gone by now. But anyway, it's a sort of a tragic story. There was two boys, and they went hunting one Saturday morning in the woods. They decided they was going to go rabbit hunting, squirrel hunting, one of the two. So they decided they was going to go hunting, and they did. They went hunting early one morning. Well, after a few hours or so, one of the boys come running back into the town and screaming bloody murder. And everybody wouldn't know what's wrong, what's the matter. And he said his buddy that he'd went hunting with said they was crossing a fence. And as they was crossing the fence, they had laid their guns against the fence. And as they was crossing, one of the guns went off. As they mashed the fence down, it pulled the trigger, and the gun went off and shot his friend in the face, killing him instantly. So of course everybody gathered up and they went and they got the young man, and sure enough he was dead. And it shook the town up pretty good. This was back in the 30s, I'd say. And they buried the young boy, and the boy had a pitiful story. He had been abandoned by his mother. She had run off and left him with her aunt to raise. So her aunt was already, elderly up in the years. The boy didn't have no mama, and I'm not sure what happened with the daddy. But all I knew from the story was he was being raised by his aunt. And the reason I remember this was everybody in the community believed the boy's story. He was crying when he come back. Everybody but her. She didn't believe him for a minute. And of course, the rumors was in that town, in that little community, this lady was a witch. Somebody left a penny on this grave. She was a witch. Looks like a Civil War soldier. And the townspeople knew it, and the townspeople knew she wasn't to be messed with. she rumored had a black bag that she would carry with her, and when she unzipped this bag, there was a claw of some sort of animal's claw, I'm not sure what, that she carried in this bag. And they said it stunk. And you'd see her in town or pass her somewhere on the street, on the sidewalk, and if she had that on her, you could smell it, that it stunk of death and rot, even though she'd had it for years. And only very few people had ever really seen it. But the story goes that if she scratched you with this thing, then that was it for you. You were going to live about 3 more days, and then you would die. And everybody knew this story. You know, it was a well-known thing. Supposedly she had done this to either, I can't remember, maybe it was her husband. A long time ago she had done this to, or somebody that wronged her husband. It's been so long since I've heard these stories, I can't remember. But anyway, they knew that this was the price you would pay if she scratched you with this, because she had done it in the past, maybe more than once. Let's see if we can't set these flowers back up on this grave here. Try to do some good if I can. So she didn't believe this boy. She questioned him a little bit about what happened. And he got real nervous. He didn't want to talk to her or anything. And she finally one day just asked him. Said, "Did you try to help him at all when this happened?" The boy answered her, yes, I did. I tried every way in the world to help him. You know, I held him in my arms as he was dying. You know, he couldn't do or say much because he was shot in the face, but yes, I did. So then the old lady asked him, "Well, why did you not have no blood on your clothes?" He didn't have an answer for that. He run away from her that day. He knew she was on to him. Rumor goes that these two boys had the likings for the same girl in the community. And one of the boys, the boy that died, was kind of jealous of the other one. And they'd gotten into a fight before. He was jealous because the one who died, because he lived in this old shack with his aunt, and you know, he didn't have a mother, dad, or house or anything, and he'd kindly said something to the other boy, and it had made him mad, his friend. So they thought his friend, after being mad, saying something to him, took him out, shot him. And nobody will ever really know, but that witch knew. She knew. People would see her coming on the sidewalk, and they would change sides of the road they walked on. This woman just was evil. Well, that day after questioning, he's going home, and it's an old dirt road that he lived on. I've been on that road. And as he's walking home, he could hear that old woman. He could hear laughter coming from the woods. And it's just about dark, and this scared him to death. And that laughter seemed to grow louder and louder, but he couldn't see her or find her nowhere. When all of a sudden, he got a sharp pain on his right side. Terrible burning sensation. And he looked down, and there was a big old scratch on his side when he lifted his shirt. Big old bloody streaks. And then the laughter was just right in his ear. And he could hear her say, "I got you. 3 days. 3 days." Well, supposedly on the first day, and we get this story from 2 different people. One's a preacher, and then one's the actual boy that told it before he died. On the first day, he didn't put much stock into it, but that night he could hear whispering, and he didn't sleep none at all. Come the second night, he could hear more whispering, and it was louder, but then this time too, he could smell that claw. He could smell that rot, like it was just outside his window waiting on him. And then come the third day. The third day was told as when you would die, was when whatever spell or conjuring that this old lady put on you when you were scratched, that would be when it would come to get you. So now we switch to the preacher's story in the community. And the preacher, he didn't put a whole lot of stock in stuff like witchcraft and stuff. He believed in it and he knew it was true, but he just didn't believe that there was that many people out here in these mountains that could actually do witchcraft. You know, it's one thing to proclaim it, and it's another thing to make it happen. So he really didn't believe the story much, and he's sitting home one evening about dark, and he lived right next to the church. His house, it was one of those deals where the church housed the preacher on the property, actually. So he had a little house on the church property. And all of a sudden there come a banging at his door. Somebody knocking, desperately knocking. And he opens the door, and it's that young boy. And he asks him, you know, what's the matter, son? What's got you all tore up? He says, preacher, it's come to get me tonight. Tonight's the night. It's the third night. And supposedly the preacher claims that he told the boy, I don't put no stock in that. That woman's just trying to torment you. She thinks you've done something, that you killed her nephew, and she's just trying to torment you, son. You're on holy ground right now. You're fine. The boy said, well, I know that. He said, that's why I'm here. But he said, preacher, come out here and look. Look down the road there. The preacher ambles out there and looks down the road. He lifts his torch up, or his lantern, whatever he's carrying there. He can see something. He can see something standing in the road. When he lifted his torch up, it kind of went away. It was like a shadow. But then when he put his torch back down, he could see it again. It was there, standing, and it was waiting on that boy. The preacher invited the boy in. The boy come in, and they sat and they talked the better part of the night. The boy seemed to be getting in worse shape. He got sick. Showed the preacher where he'd been scratched, and it looked like gangrene had already set up in his side. And his side was starting to rot and stink. And the boy told the preacher, said, I know I'm going to die tonight. Whatever that is out there has come to take me. And before I go, I want to confess that it was me. I was the one that shot my friend, shot the young man. I don't know what their names was. Should have made up some, but he confessed to that preacher that night. It was the story the preacher would go on to later tell. And the boy left. He said, I can't stay here all night. I've got to go face what I've done now, face what's waiting on me out there. And the preacher walked out with him, and they didn't see nothing. There's nothing there in the darkness. The shadow thing was gone, or it couldn't be seen. The boy wanted the preacher to tell his family he loved him, thank for taking his confession, and the boy walked on off into the darkness. And the preacher went on to say a few minutes later, he heard the awfulest screaming ever was. He went back in, went down the road and woke up some people. They went to look, and they found that young man about sunrise, laying at the side of the road dead. He had a look of fright on his face, look of fear. Now they claimed he died from the poisoning, the gangrene, but the police and everybody, the coroner and everybody, said it looked like he died of fright. Said he had a look on his face. You know, a lot of times when they go to close your eyes and stuff and wipe your face when you've died, you know, and try to put a pleasant look on their face, they couldn't do it with him. They would wipe his face, and it's almost like his facial muscles was frozen in that position, a look of horror. And some people said they gave him a closed casket funeral, but for this reason there, I don't know. That's way before my time. But as time goes on, years later, now the preacher's elderly. The preacher's about to pass away. And before he does, he tells another story. He tells the story of being visited one night by an old lady that everybody in the community stayed away from. An old witch lady come to the preacher. And she had a talk with him at the door. He didn't invite her in. But he was amazed how she could even walk on his property, walk on the land. Thought, well, surely she's not evil, as everybody says, or or she's got some kind of spell or trinket, I don't know, but she's here on this property, and I'm going to talk to her. She goes on to tell the preacher that it was her who caused this young man's death, along with about 3 or 4 more. And she wanted to confess this to the preacher. And of course, the preacher talks to her and tells her, you know, she needs to profess it to the Lord. You know, he will listen to her and talk to her and everything. But, you know, ultimately, it's God who needs to forgive you. And she says, well, I'm not looking as much forgiveness for that as for what it's caused. And the preacher says, ma'am, I'm not sure I'm reading what you're saying, what you're trying to tell me here. She says, preacher, for everybody that I have conjured a spell up on, it turns something loose on the land. Once that person dies, it doesn't go away. This evil crawls across the land. It stays. It remains in these woods, in these forests. She said, I've turned loose 3 to maybe 4 things in my lifetime that once I'm gone, they'll still remain here. This evil that's been conjured up, it don't leave, it don't go nowhere. It remains in these hills and mountains. And it crawls around looking for who it can destroy, whose life it can destroy, who it can scare, who it can bleed, who it can take from and cause misery, because that's what evil does. And she said it'll take many forms. It'll look like many different things, but it won't look pleasant. You will know when you see it that it is pure, outright evil. She said, that's what I want forgiveness for. She said, I don't know how many lives, as long as time goes on, how long and how many lives these things will reach out and affect until the world ceases to be anymore. How many people is going to be tormented because of what I've turned loose on this world. And she goes on to talk to the preacher for a few minutes, and she explains to him that it's that way with all these old mountain witches who conjure evil. Now, not everybody that's a witch conjures evil. Let's get that straight out first. You know, that's not something, and a lot of people can conjure it. A lot of these witches can, but they don't. And you always wonder why. Well, here's what she told him, that every time they conjure something up evil, then it's set loose on this land to roam and harm people. And she's the blame for it. She's the cause of it. And she later died, just shortly after her visit with this preacher. And the preacher kept that with him for a long time before he told people. And that's why I think a lot of this stuff that we see in the mountains, these pale crawlers, maybe even these dog men, it's something that's been conjured by somebody a long time ago that still walks this land. You know, when you see these things, it's evil. It's pure evil when you see these things. So, who knows? That, you know, that may be the connection. There's a lot of, you know, the immigrants that come here done a lot of witchcraft. The Celts, Scottish people, Irish, you know, all that come here with the immigrants long ago and learned how to do that. And I think there was also something here before they got here that was already evil in these mountains. And maybe they made a union, I don't know, but that's my beliefs. When you see pale crawlers, and those are rarely seen, but I've had a few of my buddies claim to see them. They didn't call them that, but by what they explained to me and the different things that I've heard and seen, that I kindly believe that you see those things where evil works have been done. And as far as the dog man goes, you know, that's just pure evil looking you straight in the eyes when you see them. You can look at a picture of a Bigfoot, and then you can look at a picture of a dog man, and you can feel which one's evil and which one's not. Not saying neither one of them are not evil, but you can see which one means to harm you the most. So that's my belief. That's where I think a lot of this comes from. Back in these dark hollows, that at some point they've been some conjuring going on. Of course, a lot of people done it just for fun. You know, they didn't care about the consequences that would later be. So you go to these places and you get these feelings that something's watching you, or you see something out of the corner of your eye. You know, you don't never know what's been done on that land decades or centuries before you ever walked there. What's been turned loose by these witches. What's been brought from its world into our world, and now it's stuck here. Now it lingers around here to harm people. Anyway, that's just my thoughts. I've thought a lot about it, talked to a lot of my buddies, you know, and we've talked about that stuff. And I thought being back in the Smokies, straight out of the LBL, I'm back home now. I'm back where I belong, out there where the mountains are. Back in the Smokies, I thought I'd come across with one of these old tales that Granny would tell me. And like I said, I remember seeing the old house the boy was raised in. Was killed, the witch's nephew, I guess. And I remember the town. I've often thought about, like to find their grave, but I have no way of even knowing what their names are now. Everybody's done passed on in my family that wouldn't remotely know. But anyhow, guys, thought I'd get back in here and holler at you. I might shoot another video or two while I'm up here walking around. Just go ahead and put a small collection on my phone, that way I can turn one loose every so often. But guys, back home in the Smokies here, back where I belong. You like my walking stick I carved up there on the LDL. That stick comes straight off the Dogman Trail. I walked out there one day, broke it off, sat there and whittled it while I talked to everybody and a bunch of good people. Made me a walking stick. So I got a part of the LBL goes with me to these Smoky Mountains now. Guys, I'll get off here, man. And I will holler back at you guys later. I'll be back on here with another story before you know it. Thanks, guys.